Hi family, thanks for watching. So making the commentary for editing this video is well overdue. I am over a month behind on getting this video about our last bee inspection out. But when we did do the last inspection, it was a really hot day in June, and my husband and I had already been doing a lot of yard work and were quite grumpy before we even got into the hives. So we just basically did a quick look. We didn't even have a chance to go through all the hives. We never actually went through green hive. But one thing that we did quickly discover was, although there was a lot of activity on the outside of the hive, that didn't exactly reflect what was going on the inside of the hive. So if you are new to beekeeping and you're trying to judge how your hive is doing, you really just got to get in it and inspect it, because you can speculate all you want on the outside, but it's a bit like Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger's word I can't say. But it's really impossible to tell what is going on without maybe actually having a camera inside of it, which is an investment we're not willing to make. So we did have a lot of concerns going into our last inspection. The queens weren't laying eggs. Purple was having a drone problem. She was laying too many drones. I'm not sure if it was the new queen or the old queen doing that, but there was an issue there. And we had suspected at the time that was because of the heat wave that we had in late May. Weather had normalized after that. In fact, this is now September and it is much cooler than it was this time last year. But yeah, it was essentially, I think, 6 weeks after the inspection before last that we decided we were just going to leave the hives alone to see if they resettled themselves after the heat. And we've actually bought ourselves a weather station for the future to be able to do a better job of monitoring what the temperature is like. And maybe after we have that for a while, I'll make a video about reviewing that. But I don't know about you, but I often find that the weather on my phone doesn't always correlate to the one above me. So we'll see how our weather station holds up over a year or so. I'll go through each one pretty quickly here because the results were a bit depressing at the time. Yellow new nuke, unfortunately, was dead. It had a lot of activity on the outside, but once we popped it open, those were pretty much just robbers. It never requeened. So we just pinched that one and took the supplies away. So forest hive. Forest hive was a new one that we had taken from blue nuke and put it into some boxes that we had that are forest green color. And that hive was very weak. It was underperforming. It was there. We saw the queen. We saw a few brood and eggs. So it too may not make it. And overall, we gave it another couple weeks to settle itself down. Purple hive. Purple hive was dead. It looked like moths took it over. We took away all the equipment for Purple hive. We will let it sit out for a while, try to get all the moths off of all the frames and everything. But Purple hive had been struggling for a while, and it finally just probably succumbed to the pests. Yellow hive. Yellow hive was actually the shocker. Now, yellow hive as well had the problem where it wasn't laying any eggs and we weren't sure if the queen was there. In fact, I'm fairly certain the queen had swarmed. But the biggest shock we had before we even got to that point was the fact that they were using the flow hive. It's only taken us 4 years, 5 years maybe to get there. A fellow beekeeper at a local farmer's market was explaining his theory on why the flow hive doesn't work for us. And that is because our flow season, I think is the terminology you use, is very short. Our window where the flow, basically flowers are in bloom, is a very short season because we do get such extreme temperatures that the flow hive never really gets a chance to establish himself. Our running theory for why it wasn't working is because it's a lot of plastic and the bees aren't fond of plastic, but who really knows? What I do know is that we finally had the girls putting honey in there this year. And once we got into the actual brood frames, we found lots of eggs. In fact, we even found queen cells as well as the queen. So we had read recently that a queen will swarm once the queen cells are capped. So I don't know if this queen was getting ready to swarm or not, or if that's not 100% accurate, but we did mark her so that the next time we go in and if we see her, we'll know if she is a new queen or if she's our queen. We were able to, as a result, take away those frames with all the queen cells on them, and hopefully we can try again with new yellow nuke, which I guess now that we used yellow boxes, is that new yellow hive or is that yellow hive? Or Do we have to rename the yellow hive now to yellow-green hive? We'll figure boxing coloring situations out in the future. Since yellow was doing so well and we had spotted the queen, we went ahead and did a mite count with yellow. 1 mite out of 300. So the great news with that is all of our problems this summer have not been because of mites. In fact, we used a new treatment method this year that we learned from Randy Oliver. If you haven't heard about him, you should definitely give him a look. His speeches can be a bit dense. We've been to a couple of his lectures. But he has a sponge method that he suggests, and it appears to have worked as well as he promised. He is a very passionate individual, and he has a lot of information to share. In fact, I had to put my husband in charge of deciphering and repeating his recipe. Green hive, we never got to because, again, as I said, we were hot and cranky, and it was 1 hive too far for us. We did end up putting the supers back for it. We knew we weren't going to be able to get back into it right away, so we wanted to make sure that it had plenty of space. And I've proven rightly so because it's 2 months later. So overall, we're pretty bummed that we lost about half our apiary, but at least we had yellow for sure surviving. So you just need one to be able to get yourself restarted again. August, of course, is always a busy month for our family, and we never really have time to care for the bees. Now that it is September, we are going to need to get in there and start preparing it for harvest and for the winter. In the past, winter prep usually meant removing all the supers, of course, and putting insulation on the top and bottom. I don't know if I'm going to do it this year. Last year it was so warm, it was completely unnecessary, and all it did was invite ants in. So I may wait and see if it's even going to be needed this year. It is easier to do when the weather's much more amiable, as opposed to trying to do it when it's colder. You take bigger risks of hurting your hive that way. But I just don't want a repeat of all the pests that we had this season. And I will focus on getting to that this week. Of course, today would have been a perfect day to do it, but I took the time to record this video instead. So if you could do us a favor, please hit the like button, leave us a comment if you have any questions, and thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.